Hello, Molweni, Sanu, Hujambo. Welcome to Unwrap Africa. I'm Thembekile Mrototo. And on this program, as always, we focus on the latest news, trends, and successes of the African continent. Siyaqaqa. Let's get going with our question of the day. We're asking for your thoughts regarding the tragedy that's unfolding in Sudan at the moment. Should it be characterized as a genocide? We're hearing of hundreds of people, according to some people, killed. The RSF, Rapid Support Forces, being blamed for most of those deaths. The country has been in the grips of a civil war since April of 2023. So what do you make of the situation in Sudan? Is there a genocide unfolding in that country? We'll take your thoughts on WhatsApp. The number is +278 459 1897. You can also find us on Facebook. SABC Unwrap Africa is our name there, and on X we're at SABC News_TV.
SABC, host broadcaster of the G20 South Africa 2025.
So it's exactly 20 days until South Africa hosts the Group of 20 Leaders Summit. The Johannesburg Metro will host world leaders for the summit in late November. It is the first time that an African nation will basically play host to this important gathering. The former Minister of Finance in Nigeria and the founder of Amandla Institute for Policy and Leadership Advancement, Dr. Ikuenobe says it's time for Africa to push for the beneficiation of its minerals, and the continent must dedicate terms on the rare minerals that are used for the advancement of technology in other parts of the world.
I look forward to South Africa leading that agenda. The way that in the early 2000s, South Africa, Nigeria, Algeria, Ethiopia led from the front on the new partnership for Africa's development. It's time for Africa again. It's time for us to lead the debate and to ensure that we are not on the menu. We are actually at the table, defining what should happen to the continent.
US President Donald Trump has threatened military action against Nigeria, accusing the government in that country of allowing the killing of Christians. He's vowed to stop aid and help to the country and take military action to, quote, completely wipe out Islamic terrorists whom he's accused of committing horrible atrocities. SABC News correspondent Sherwin Bryce Pease has this update now on how the Nigerian President Bola Tinubu had said that his country opposed religious persecution and that constitutional guarantees are in place to protect people of all faiths.
Trump called Nigeria a disgraced country, to go in guns a-blazing to wipe out what he called Islamist terrorists, adding that he'd instructed the Pentagon, which is also called the Department of War, to prepare for possible action. He said if Nigeria were attacked, it would be fast, vicious and sweet. He warned the Nigerian government, which has rejected the claims, to act fast. And while Christians are among those targeted, the majority of victims are Muslims in Nigeria's Muslim-majority north, where most attacks occur. President Tinubu said Trump's labeling of Nigeria as a country of concern was not a reflection of the reality on the ground. Sherwin Riceby's SABC News.
Speaking of the Nigerian President Bola Tinubu, he posted a statement over the weekend pushing back against claims of religious intolerance in the country. He also defended Nigeria's efforts to protect religious freedom. He says that the characterization of Nigeria as a religiously intolerant nation does not reflect the national reality, nor does it take into consideration the consistent and sincere efforts, he says, of the government to protect the freedom of religion and beliefs for all Nigerians. Well, Trump's post about the situation in Nigeria came a day after his government said the country, or added the country back, in fact, to a list of countries of particular concern. So these are countries that the US says have violated religious freedom. There's been global condemnation of the killing of civilians in Sudan over the last few days, and now there are calls for that to be classified as a genocide. And we want to hear your thoughts regarding that call as the military and the rapid support forces continue to fight in the country since 2023. We're asking you, after the events of the past week, is there a genocide unfolding in Sudan? So we've been out on the streets of Gaborone in Botswana and got the views of people there about the situation that is currently unfolding in Sudan.
I think the genocide is unfolding, and I think Sudan has been under fire or under conflict for a while now. And as Africans, I think it's time that we come together and put our border lines away and see how we can all come together and help Sudan. This is happening to civilians, and the country is falling apart. So I think Africa needs to come together and find a way to assist Sudan.
In terms of genocide, like in what's happening in Sudan and what happened in Rwanda, the African Union should have a standpoint, not just talking but also taking action to help the masses and actually liberate the people and bring peace to Africa as a continent.
I think the war in Sudan, we've let it go on for far too long. It keeps subsiding and coming back. I don't honestly think we are doing enough. African Union particularly has adopted a non-interference policy, if I may say, because they tend to keep quiet and not voice out as much as we would voice. I'm disappointed because if it was abroad, we would be voicing out about what's happening in Jamaica, what's happening where, but we are leaving Sudan here. And a genocide is unfolding, obviously, bit by bit. If every year we are losing over 1,000 lives, in 10 years we've lost how many lives? So I think other Africans, we need to do better. We need to stand with our brothers because very soon we'll have an extinct nation if we are not careful about it.
I think there is a genocide. So as Africans, we just unite our military, then stop the war there.
I don't think the issue our African countries should come together and try to mitigate the issue because already we solution. So it's been years and years, but still we have SADC, we have all these organizations that have been formed, African Union, SADC, but they are useless.
I believe in peace. I believe that like the other person said, we must forget about our borderlines, having to say we are focusing inside our country. We must cross borders, help some other people out there who are dying, and make sure that there is peace. The main thing is peace.
July with Unwrap Africa on SABC News. As always, we want to keep you across everything that's happening on the continent. And one of those things is the Elevate Africa Summit, a premier event that is meant to unite industry leaders, innovators, as well as regulators to drive the continent's progress through showcasing innovations, sharing knowledge, and of course, fostering collaboration. The summit propels, it says, vital sectors like agriculture, healthcare, and logistics. A keynote address, multiple keynote addresses, in fact, were delivered in the last few days. Panels also sat to discuss the many issues facing the African continent. There were also live demonstrations that are meant to show the different ways in which creators on the continent are doing their bit to help push us forward as Africans. Well, after a successful gathering in Nigeria, the summit landed in Botswana this past week. Let's speak more about this with the Elevate Africa CEO, Daniel Ikuenobe. Daniel, a very good evening to you. Welcome to Unwrap Africa on SABC News. So let's start first with the key takeaways, if you will, from this year's gathering in Botswana and how they align perhaps with the development objectives, the goals of the continent more broadly.
Thank you, Thembe. Really appreciate being here. Well, it's an evolving movement. Elevate Africa is evolving into a soft power platform for impact. When we're using storytelling and narrative transforms as a tool for systems change, the idea is to bring leaders in governance and development and private sector around a clear agenda that will be, evolved as we go along, and then see how we can facilitate intra-Africa and global trade and amplify our unique identity as a people. In fact, we say that we want to make Africa smaller because it's easier for us to trade when we have existing relationships. There are a lot of people who are doing great work on the continent, and they're doing that in silos, doing great building work and all of that. But we say that there are very few binders in the space, and we're trying we're operating in the binder space. And we see ourselves as architects, as orchestrators, as binders, and as catalysts. So the key takeaway was, one, that it's clear that we need stronger governance on the continent, but not just to say that, but there are some good stories that we can tell on good governance. And that's one of the reasons why this year's convening was held in Gaborone, Botswana, because Botswana is one of Africa's best kept secret, one of the best run, best governed countries on the continent. Mo Ibrahim Index rates it high, number one, and the Chandler Good Governance Index ranks it top 3 on the continent. So we thought to do this, where there with an example on the continent. Yeah.
It sounds like a very big undertaking, right? And I'm wondering how you begin to curate a sort of program that is able to lead to meaningful change, but that also speaks to the differences across the more than 50 African states. So getting the right voices in the room must take a fair bit of effort and consideration from you.
Yeah. I heard the first part, but I lost sound after midway into your question. But the part I heard was with regards to taking on this undertaking with the number of countries that we have. We basically say that for us, it is one person, one project, and one place at a time. And so we see that it's important that we have like what we call a drip strategy. And the idea is we can't just do it all at once. So with every convening, with the fellowship that we run and all the activities that we're dealing with, each of them is geared and focused towards pulling the entire continent together, gaining those insights, building bridges, unlocking potential, and making things happen for the continent.
And Daniel, given the work that Elevate Africa intends to do or set out to do, how do you then facilitate collaboration as well as knowledge sharing among industry leaders as well as regulators and even innovators? And what impact has this had on the development of the continent?
So, everything begins with relationships. So one of the things we are very intentional in is building those bridges across jurisdictions, building the bridges across industry, and then seeing how we can get the best of our various countries and then push out the worst of us. So what we've basically done is through our fellowship, through our convenings, the 3 pillars, remain consistent. Speaking to how we improve governance, because that sets the vision and ensures that we get things done in a very structured and impactful way, ensure that there is exchange happening. In fact, examples was on the floor of all of our engagements. We saw, I spoke about that in my remarks on stage, where it was like there were 2 very senior people from 2 countries whose presidents had committed to do some work together. They met themselves there and then they scheduled how they were going to make progress with those conversations and make those presidents have private meetings, to get those projects through. And so you are seeing that we are beyond the top line. You are ensuring that other great things are happening, beneath the surface, both with regards to governance and delivery, as well as investment flows, trade and commerce, and also the issues around our sense of identity and our culture, reclaiming our history and our stories. Yeah.
And you're trying to take the summit to different parts of the African continent, which I would imagine is quite important in terms of getting an understanding and even giving ownership more broadly to the continent of the platform. How do you go about selecting where you go? There's been a gathering in Nigeria. This year you've been in Botswana. And how do you ensure the event's relevance and impact in each location?
So it's evolving. It's work in progress. We are evolving one step in front of the other. We had the first in Nigeria. Some other countries had requested for us to come, but we knew that we had to show the distribution beyond just West Africa. You want South Africa, East Africa, North Africa, Central Africa, and ensure that it has that spread. However, there might be a few constraints and considerations with regards to how we make those decisions. Sometimes it's regards to resource, because in terms of who our founders have been the primary funders. Now with a few other organizations and entities now saying, okay, we'd like to take on some of the burden. One of the things that we like to say that we can't elevate Africa without African money. And so our founders have put their resources where their heart is, but we are hoping that we can have others who will also partner with us to make this dream a reality. I would say that doing it in Botswana was a heavy lift, both in terms of the financial commitment, but also a lot of learnings in terms of the diplomatic implications, the bureaucratic implications, the logistical implications of doing that. And so we are evolving and learning and also planning on the go. Part of the requirement is that it has to have the highest level sponsorship and partnership for it to work. It must have the highest interest from the governments. And then because that is the only way where decisions and actual actions can be taken. So that is a major reason. After our experience in Botswana, which was very good, we're evolving our rubric and our criteria for deciding on how we enter countries.
Thank you very much for that, Daniel Ikuenobe, speaking to us there, the CEO of Unwrap Africa, speaking to us at the end of a week of engagements, a summit that was held, in fact, in Botswana. And as I was saying, we'll hopefully see them in South Africa next time. Let's have a look at some of the reactions to our question of the day. We've been asking, after the events of the past week, is there an ongoing genocide that is unfolding in Sudan? We're hearing of people being executed, the RSF rapid military forces being blamed for that, mass killings, people being displaced. How have you been responding? Let's have a look. Musimbi Stephen says that Sudan doesn't have any membership to help it, because when you just keep lamenting, things keep worsening as lives continue vanishing. Where is the AU and what's their role? Are they also captured by what? Well, that's what Musimbi says he's thinking. Majaboy says, evil has taken over the world. What are the things that are happening? Is there anyone really fighting for humanity? I'm so sick of all of this going on in Africa. Vardeen Sauti says, when will Africa learn to confront its problems and sort it out diligently without their shift to the West for help? Unless you're style up in writing your own stories, you'll be culprits day in, day out. And Steve Mwema says it's heartbreaking how global powers mobilize instantly elsewhere, but watch in silence as Sudan burns. If justice has borders, then humanity has failed. And the Unwrap Africa team, as well as the SABC News team as a whole, will continue to keep an eye on what's unfolding in Sudan, one of the worst humanitarian crises at the moment as a result of the war between the military and the rapid support forces. This Unwrap Africa. Thanks for staying with us. ECOWAS is celebrating 50 years since its establishment this weekend. The West African Economic Community is the longest regional organization in Africa, longest running at least we should say, but it has experienced many challenges. SABC senior news correspondent Sophie Mukwena has been speaking to Professor Medan Tedesi on the margins of the ECOWAS summit.
I think, one, it went wrong in the sense that they were not prepared for the global shifts and challenges. And two, they are not anchored in popular consent and participation and, this what you call as like interdependence. It has shifted into a club of, leaders, and in recent years it has become a club of authoritarian pacts, So both the economic, the political, the social foundations have become eroded. Yeah.
And we see the young people rising on the continent. What does this tell us?
It tells us that the social contract in many African countries need to be redefined, because there is no internal peace in many countries. The youth is struggling for jobs. There are socio-economic needs unmet. There is a crisis of legitimacy of governments. Apart from that, the legitimacy of regional organizations and their capacity has been weakened. How can they, for instance, negotiate on behalf of Africa, while even they cannot negotiate their own place in global gatherings? They cannot even, make their voices heard, let alone to take, the real legitimate issues of Africa, its representation, its economic development, its transition, political transition. They are not in a place where they can negotiate with force, with unity, because everything has changed. And in this sense, most of these regional organizations are facing a crisis of legitimacy. They are facing a crisis of leadership. Look at the African Union. It's not even invited in the Sudanese peace talks. The Sudanese peace process is being organized in the Gulf by Saudi Arabia.
And the countries in the Gulf, they are supplying arms to the rebels. Some of
it. They are involved in wars and conflicts, mainly in extracting minerals, resources, supporting militias, undermining governments, just because regional organizations are not strong enough to face the challenge.
And finally, on another issue, South Africa will be hosting the G20 meeting. And now that the AU, being as weak as it is supposed to take its rightful place in the G20, because now it's a member of the G20. What's your view, the coming summit in South Africa? Do you think the African voice will be heard by these big guys?
I think it will be heard to the extent that, South Africa and African countries clarify their priorities, establish coherence among themselves, and have a united voice. The problem with many African governments now, including regional organizations and mainly the AU, is that it is becoming transactional. So, negotiating separately with Washington, negotiating separately with Beijing, they cannot control even their resources now, because both Beijing and Washington are competing in Africa to control the supply chains. So how can you have an economic base for integration while your resources are being wired elsewhere? So I think the political and economic preconditions need to be really thought out very well, and there should be coherence, and there should be unity of purpose, and the priority should be in place. If they do that, I think they might have a chance, yeah.
And this comes at a time the issue of the rare minerals are becoming problematic to the continent. How do we go to the G20 and make a bold statement in terms of this time around, this fourth industrial revolution the terms will be dictated by Africa with her minerals?
Yes, I think in fact this is a critical issue because people say we are entering a multipolar world. I call it a multi-mineral world when it comes to Africa. It's about controlling minerals. And to control these minerals, you don't use even the normal conventional state-state dialogue and relations. You only use different backdoors, you support militias, you weaken governments, and what is weakening of these governments, what is left of these governments is being turned into clearing house of militarized rents. So you control militias, you deal with some governments, and you only focus on the mineral areas and the corridors and supply chains, and you simply ignore and forget about African organizations. I think this needs to be debated and anchored in a united, prioritized mechanisms.
That is it from the Unwrap Africa team for this week. We're back with you 8 p.m. next Sunday right here on SABC News. Up next, though, is G20 Focus with Thulasizwe Simelane. Tonight's question is whether Africa can leverage its critical minerals for its own development. So stand by for Thulas and the G20 Focus team. Bye-bye.